What would happen if a wealthy man abandoned everything he knew and chose to live as the poorest person in a small Filipino community for an entire month? Would he witness suffering? Would he find broken systems? Or would he stumble upon a truth that the rest of the world seems to have lost along the way? This is the story of a man who disguised himself as poor in the Philippines, and what he found shook him to his core. When Marcus Hai first stepped onto the streets of Manila, he blended into the crowd like a shadow, and that was the whole point. On paper, Marcus was an Australian fintech founder who had quietly built and exited 2 companies before turning 36. He had delivered keynotes in Tokyo and Dubai. He had backers in San Francisco. He understood data, growth, and leverage. But there was one thing that escaped him entirely: contentment. Marcus had studied global happiness reports. He had noticed how the Philippines, despite widespread poverty, kept ranking among the most cheerful nations on the planet. He watched clips of trike drivers giving free rides to strangers, of entire neighborhoods rebuilding homes after storms, of Filipino workers abroad sending earnings back to their families with joy instead of bitterness. It puzzled him deeply. How could people who had almost nothing carry so much light? So he made a choice that baffled everyone who knew him. He would fly to the Philippines alone. No entourage, no 5-star resorts, no business agendas. He would survive for 30 days on what an ordinary laborer earns daily. He would rent a tiny space in a humble community outside the city center. He would wear plain clothes. He would hide his wealth and identity from every person he met. He told absolutely no one the truth. Through a local parish connection, Marcus secured a cramped room in a barangay in Caloocan City. The walls were made of thin plywood sheets. The ceiling fan groaned louder than it cooled. The bathroom was communal. Outside, tricycles hummed like angry insects. Kids chased each other barefoot across broken pavement. Sari-sari stores crowded the tight alleyways, their fronts decorated with hanging sachets of soap and powdered coffee like tiny colorful banners. The first night, Marcus lay still, listening to distant karaoke drifting through the thick warm air. Someone was belting out an old ballad, slightly out of tune but full of soul. He reached for his phone. No reception inside the room. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he was completely cut off. The following morning, he met Tatay Nardo, the tricycle driver who lived on the other side of the wall. Tatay Nardo was in his late 50s, face carved by years of sun, smile wide and completely natural. He greeted Marcus with a strong handshake and without hesitation invited him for coffee. Not at some cafe, but at the sari-sari store next door, where they poured boiling water into plastic cups and mixed an instant coffee powder. Marcus paused. In his former life, meetings took place behind glass walls in climate-controlled rooms. Here, conversations unfolded beside dripping laundry lines and restless stray dogs. But he accepted. Over that simple cup, Tatay Nardo talked about his 3 children. One was working in Saudi Arabia as an overseas worker. One was taking up a medical course. The youngest was still finishing high school. He spoke of sacrifice, yes, but never once of resentment. He laughed easily. He poked fun at Marcus's clumsy attempts at Tagalog. He absolutely refused to let Marcus pay for the coffee. "You just got here," he said warmly. "You are one of us now." One of us. Marcus had investors. He had co-founders. He had thousands of connections on professional platforms. But he could not recall the last time anyone had simply called him one of their own. Days blurred together. Marcus looked for odd jobs, just as he had committed to doing. He hauled crates of vegetables at a wet market. He carried heavy bags of grain for a neighborhood store owner. He earned small amounts, barely enough to cover food and rent. He learned fast that stretching money in the barangay demanded constant ingenuity. Meals were basic: rice, eggs, occasionally salted fish. Yet every evening without fail, neighbors drifted outside. plastic chairs materialized from doorways. Someone always brought a little extra food. Someone always offered to share. One night, a sudden downpour flooded half the street. Murky water crept into several homes. Without a single announcement, men and women formed a human chain, passing sandbags hand over hand. Teenagers hauled furniture to higher ground. Someone appeared with steaming cups of ginger tea for everyone. Marcus stood stunned. There was no formal coordination, no relief truck, no compensation, just people showing up for each other. Later, drenched and worn out, he asked Tate Nardo why everyone works so hard for their neighbors. Tate Nardo gave a small shrug. Because next time it could be my house. That answer lodged itself deep inside Marcus. In his previous life, help always came wrapped in agreements, conditions, brand visibility. Here, help arrived silently, without expectation. As days stretched into weeks, Marcus began seeing something beneath the surface. Poverty was undeniable. Hardship was constant. Some families went without meals. Some lived in quiet terror of medical bills. But even through all of it, there was pride. There was laughter. There was Bayanihan, the ancient Filipino tradition of communal strength, where neighbors shoulder each other's weight the way their ancestors once carried entire homes on bamboo poles. Marcus had read about Bayanihan in articles before his trip, but reading about it on a screen was nothing compared to standing knee-deep in floodwater at midnight beside strangers who embraced him like a brother. One afternoon, he met Nanay Celia, an old woman who operated a tiny eatery from her front window. She worked from before dawn until well past dark, serving cheap but hearty meals to workers and drivers. Marcus ate there often, carefully counting his coins before ordering. One day, he realized he was a few pesos short. Shame flooded through him. He apologized and promised to return with the balance the next morning. Nanay Celia brushed it off with a wave of her wrinkled hand. "Just eat," she said gently. "Nobody should go hungry." Marcus tried to insist, but she smiled with quiet authority. "When you have enough, you give enough. That is how it works." That evening, Marcus sat alone in his tiny room, watching the ceiling fan wobble above him. In Sydney, he had once spent weeks negotiating equity deals worth millions. Yet here, a woman who earned in a month what he once spent on a single dinner was teaching him about generosity without even realizing it. Something deep inside him started to crack open. He began asking himself a question he had never once entertained. What if everything he believed about wealth was wrong? But the true test had not arrived yet. Because in his final week, Marcus would face a moment that would challenge whether he was simply watching from the sidelines or whether he was truly ready to step into the story. And what unfolded next would force him to reveal the one truth he had guarded carefully since the very first day he arrived. The truth Marcus had been carrying since his arrival was simple but unbearably heavy. He was not the struggling foreigner everyone assumed him to be. He was a man whose bank balance exceeded what most families in the barangay would earn across several lifetimes. And yet for 23 days, he had lived as though he had nothing at all. What caught him off guard was that the act slowly stopped feeling like an act. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon beneath a sky white with heat. Marcus had just finished hauling sacks of grain at the corner store when shouting erupted from across the narrow lane. Nanay Celia, the old woman who ran the small eatery, had collapsed on the ground. For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then, just as Marcus had witnessed during the flood, the barangay moved like a single body. Someone sprinted to flag down a tricycle. Someone fanned her face with a flattened cardboard box. A young student studying nursing knelt beside her and checked her pulse. Tate Nardo called out instructions with calm authority. Within minutes, they were rushing her toward the nearest government hospital. Marcus went with them. The hospital hallway was packed, pale fluorescent tubes buzzing above rows of worn wooden benches. Families sat quietly, clutching folders of paperwork and plastic bags of food. Marcus watched as Tatay Nardo spoke in low tones with the admitting nurse about fees. There was hesitation. Nene Celia needed lab work. She needed medicine. The cost, while modest by international standards, was far more than she had ever managed to save. Marcus saw the quiet worry cross Tatay Nardo's face like a passing cloud. Outside the room, the neighbors began gathering whatever they could. Crumpled bills, scattered coins. Someone handed over a thin envelope of emergency savings. Someone else offered to skip a monthly payment and contribute what they could. Not a single person complained. Marcus felt something clench tight in his chest. Back in his real life, he had closed investment rounds larger than this hospital's entire yearly operating budget. He had transferred funds across borders with a single swipe. And yet here he was, pretending to search an almost empty wallet while watching people who had practically nothing give absolutely everything they could. This was the moment he had dreaded since the beginning. If he exposed the truth, would it shatter the trust they had freely given him? Would it feel like deception, or even worse, like pity handed down from above, rather than love offered from beside? He walked outside into the thick evening air and sat alone on a concrete ledge. Children were still running and laughing somewhere down the road, completely unaware of the tension inside the hospital walls. The world kept spinning the way it always does. He thought back to his very first night in the barangay. The karaoke, the warmth, the word family. Family does not stand on the sidelines and watch. Marcus stood up and walked back inside. He approached Tatay Nardo quietly and asked how much more money was still needed. Tatay Nardo hesitated before answering, clearly uncomfortable. The amount was small by Marcus's standards. It was everything by theirs. Marcus took a slow breath. "There is something I have to tell you," he said. In a dim corner of the hospital corridor, beneath a flickering overhead light, Marcus told Tatay Nardo everything. He explained who he truly was, why he had come, what he had been searching for. He showed evidence on his phone, photographs, published articles, official records. He braced himself for anger. He prepared for rejection. Instead, Tatay Nardo listened in complete silence. When Marcus finished speaking, a long pause hung between them. Then Tatay Nardo asked only one question. "During all those weeks with us, were you honest with us?" Marcus felt his throat close. "Yes." Tatay Nardo studied him carefully for a moment, and gave a single slow nod. "Then that is all that matters. No grand speech. No dramatic reaction. Just acceptance." Marcus covered Nene Celia's entire treatment that night. Not as a spectacle, not in front of anyone's camera. Quietly, privately. But something he never anticipated happened in the days that followed. The barangay did not treat him any differently. They still mocked his terrible Tagalog. They still dragged him to plastic chair gatherings outside. Children still knocked on his door, asking if he wanted to come watch their street basketball game. Nene Celia, recovering slowly but steadily, insisted that he keep eating at her little eatery. This time she flat out refused to accept a single peso from him. "You took care of me," she said. "Now it is my turn to take care of you." Marcus understood something he had never grasped before. His money had solved an immediate crisis, but it had not created the connection. The connection had already been there long before that night. It was built on shared meals, shared storms, shared jokes. Wealth in this place was measured on an entirely different scale. On his last evening in the barangay, the neighbors put together a small farewell gathering. There were humble dishes laid out on a long table, noodles, steamed rice, grilled fish, homemade sweets. Someone borrowed a portable speaker. Karaoke filled the warm night air once more. Marcus looked around at the faces glowing under a single bare bulb. Faces etched with years of labor. Faces that smiled before they spoke. He had come searching for the secret behind Filipino happiness. He thought maybe it was cultural positivity, or deep religious faith, or resilience forged through centuries of hardship. And yes, All of those things were real. The Philippines had survived colonization, wars, devastating typhoons, and grinding economic inequality. Yet through every trial, something had endured that was stronger than any circumstance. Connection. Not the digital kind Marcus had spent his career perfecting. Not the transactional web of business contacts and capital calls, but raw human connection rooted in Bayanihan, in shared responsibility, in the quiet unspoken understanding that no one makes it through life alone. On his final walk down the narrow alleyway, Marcus noticed something he had somehow overlooked the entire month. The houses were small, yes. The paint was peeling. The sidewalks were cracked, but the doors were wide open. People wandered freely in and out of one another's homes without knocking. In the world he came from, security systems grew smarter every year. Doors became thicker. Walls climbed higher. Here, doors stayed open. The next morning, Marcus left before the sun came up. Tate Nardo drove him to the airport on his tricycle. They exchanged few words, both understanding that some farewells do not require language. At the departure gate, Marcus checked his phone. Messages from investors, emails about growth strategies, new opportunities lined up and waiting. But for the first time in years, none of it felt urgent. He had gone to the Philippines pretending to have nothing, expecting to witness hardship. Instead, he uncovered an entirely different meaning of richness. He learned that generosity has nothing to do with surplus and everything to do with heart. That dignity does not depend on a bank balance. That joy can thrive even in places where comfort cannot. Months later, Marcus returned, not to watch, not to experiment, but to build. He partnered with community leaders to launch small grassroots projects designed alongside the barangay, not handed down to it. Because he had learned that real transformation is never imposed from the outside. It is grown together. And whenever anyone asks him now what changed his life, he does not talk about exits or valuations or global markets. He talks about a sweltering night in a packed hospital hallway. He talks about a tricycle driver who asked one simple, honest question. He talks about a barangay that taught him that sometimes the wealthiest place on earth is not where people have the most, but where people give the most. If this story stirred something in you, drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Have you ever found something life-changing in a place you never expected? Hit that like button if this resonated with you, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next journey into the heart of the Philippines.